I want to tell you about the moment I understood what Linda had been doing. It happened at my own wedding, at the altar, in front of everyone I'd ever loved. I was halfway down the aisle when I saw her, a woman I recognized from photographs, from 6 years of careful comparisons, from the particular way Linda's voice changed whenever her name came up. She was sitting in the front row, dark hair, composed posture, a pale blue dress that looked like something you'd choose if you wanted to be noticed but couldn't be accused of trying. She was sitting 3 seats from Linda, and Linda was smiling, not the performance smile she used at dinner parties. The real one, small, private, satisfied. The smile of a woman watching something she'd built arrive at its destination. I kept walking. I don't know why. My legs kept moving and the music kept playing, and David was at the end of the aisle looking at me with an expression I couldn't fully read. And I thought, with a clarity that felt almost chemical, she planned this. I'm going to tell you what happened next, but to understand what it meant, to understand why a woman I had tried to love for 6 years was sitting at my wedding next to the ex-girlfriend she'd spent those same 6 years holding over my head. I need to start earlier. I need to start with Rachel. I met David at a work event in the spring of 2017. He was funny in a quiet way, the kind of funny that sneaks up on you, and he listened when I talked in a way I hadn't experienced enough to take for granted. We went on 3 dates before he told me about Rachel. They'd been together for 4 years. It had ended 18 months before I met him. Amicably, he said, the kind of ending that happens when 2 people who care about each other grow in different directions. He said it the way people say things when they've processed them properly, without bitterness, without drama. I respected that. It seemed healthy. What I didn't understand yet was that the relationship had ended for David and Rachel, but had not, in any meaningful sense, ended for Linda. I met Linda 6 weeks in. David had warned me she was particular. That was the word he used, particular. And I'd understood it to mean she had standards, which seemed reasonable for a woman whose only son was bringing home someone new after a significant previous relationship. She was polished, which I'd expected, warm on the surface, which I'd also expected. What I hadn't expected was how quickly the warmth developed a direction. We were at dinner, a restaurant David had chosen, Italian, candles, the kind of place you take someone you want to impress. Linda had ordered the veal and was telling me about a trip she and David had taken to Florence the previous year. She was describing a meal they'd had, some restaurant near the Arno she still thought about. Rachel found it actually, she said. She has a wonderful eye for those kinds of places. Very cultured. David kept eating. I said something polite. Do you travel much, Emily? Linda asked. I told her I did. I mentioned a trip to Japan the year before. Linda smiled. Rachel spent a summer in Japan, spoke some Japanese by the end, David told me. It was so seamless, so smoothly done. There was no accusation in it, no visible sharp edge. Just a woman talking about her dinner, mentioning a name, making a comparison that technically hadn't been made at all. I drove home that night and told myself I was being sensitive. Over the next 2 years, I became something of an expert on Rachel Moore. I learned this expertise involuntarily, through accumulation, the way you learn the furniture layout of a house you visit often enough. Not by studying it, just by moving through it until you know where everything is. Rachel made excellent pasta from scratch. Rachel had run a half marathon. Rachel knew David's work colleagues by name and always remembered their children's birthdays. Rachel had a gift for making people feel at ease, a genuine warmth, an ease in social situations that apparently came naturally. None of this was ever said directly to me. It was never, Emily, you should be more like Rachel. It was always adjacent, always approaching from the side. Remember that dinner party you and Rachel threw, David? Everyone talked about it for weeks. Rachel used to send me little notes, handwritten ones. Isn't that a lovely habit? This reminds me of something Rachel made once. Hers had more lemon. It was extraordinary. David's response to these moments was consistent. A brief redirect, a topic change, and afterward, when I tried to describe what had happened, a patient explanation that his mother meant nothing by it, that she was just nostalgic, that I was intelligent enough to know the difference between comparison and commentary. That's just Mom. I heard that phrase so many times over 6 years that I began to understand it was not a defense. It was a ceiling. It was the highest acknowledgement he was willing to offer. That Linda was a fixed condition of his life, like weather, something you dressed for rather than changed. I kept trying to dress for her. I learned to make his grandmother's recipe, the one she'd been making for 40 years, the one that had never been written down because it didn't need to be. I sat with Linda in her kitchen for an afternoon and she taught me, and I thought, this is it. This is the door. The next time we had dinner at their house and I brought the dish, Linda tasted it and said, "It's lovely. A little sweet, but that's just personal preference." That was the door. I knocked on a lot of doors over 6 years. None of them opened the way I needed. David proposed in April of the year we'd been together 4 years. It was quiet and specific to us. No public spectacle, just the two of us on the balcony of a rented house on the Oregon coast. The kind of evening that stays with you not because of its drama, but because of its honesty. I said yes before he finished the sentence. I called my parents first, then my best friend, Kyra. Then I sat with my phone in my hand for a while before calling Linda, because I was already composing the conversation in my head, already anticipating the register of her response, already bracing for whatever form her reaction would take. She said congratulations with warmth I could almost believe was unqualified. Then she said, "I hope you two have thought about the timing. Rachel and David, well, that was always the concern with them too, timing." There it was. David was in the kitchen when I came back inside. He could see my face. "She means well," he said. I smiled at him. I chose to let it go. I let a lot of things go over those years, and I need to be honest about that because it matters. I was not passive. I was not oblivious. I was someone who had decided, consciously and repeatedly, that keeping the peace was worth the cost. That the man I'd chosen came with a mother who would never fully choose me, and that this was the negotiation. I was wrong about the cost. The engagement made things worse in the specific way, that raising the stakes always makes things worse. Linda arrived with opinions about everything. The venue, a restored farmhouse outside Portland that I had fallen completely in love with, was, according to Linda, impractical, expensive to reach, and lacking the kind of timeless elegance that a wedding deserved. She mentioned twice that she knew of a place that would be perfect, a venue that David had actually visited with Rachel for a friend's wedding years ago, and wasn't it wonderful, so classic. I kept the farmhouse, the dress, which I had found on my third try, which had made me cry in the fitting room in the uncomplicated way that happens when something is exactly right, was, according to Linda, perhaps a touch too formal for a farmhouse setting. She suggested something simpler, more relaxed. She sent me a link to a dress she'd seen online. Ivory with a high neck, the kind of dress you'd choose if you wanted to disappear into a room. I kept my dress. The invitations, the flowers, the music, each one produced a version of the same conversation. Linda offering an opinion she framed as help, me receiving it with diplomacy while internally cataloging the accumulation, David intercepting the tension with variations on the phrase I'd come to dread. She just wants to be involved, but it was 2 months before the wedding that I found the messages. I wasn't looking for them. I want to be clear about that. I was on Linda's tablet. She'd asked me to look up a restaurant address while she was in the kitchen, and I'd picked it up without thinking. The browser was open to Instagram. Linda's account, and in the followed list, clearly visible, was Rachel Moore. I would not have thought much of it. They'd been close. It made some kind of sense, except that when I glanced at the activity feed, the most recent interaction was from 3 days ago. Linda had commented on a photograph of Rachel's, not a passive like. A comment, 4 words, "Thinking of you, sweetheart." 3 days ago. I set the tablet down. I looked up the restaurant address on my phone. I didn't say anything about it when Linda came back. I told David that night. He said, "She's known Rachel for years. She's allowed to still care about her." She called her sweetheart. That's how Mom talks. David, this isn't about the comment. It's about the fact that she's been in contact with your ex-girlfriend and hasn't mentioned it. While planning our wedding, he was quiet for a moment, which I took as a kind of progress. "I'll say something to her," he said. "What will you say?" "I'll just mention it, that it made you uncomfortable." I thought about the sticky note in Sophia's drawer, about how many times I'd heard a version of "I'll say something" that ended in nothing changing. But I was not yet where I would eventually arrive, so I said okay, and I let it rest. 3 weeks later, I drove past a coffee shop near Linda's neighborhood and saw them through the window. Linda and Rachel, sitting across from each other at a corner table. Not a chance encounter. The body language was wrong for chance. They were leaning in, Linda's hand on Rachel's forearm, the kind of conversation that has been happening for a long time. I kept driving. I went home and I sat in my apartment and I tried to organize what I knew into something that made sense. Linda was still in contact with Rachel. The contact was active. It was being kept from me, and it was happening while the wedding was 2 months away. I didn't know yet what it added up to. The month before the wedding felt like walking through a room where someone had moved all the furniture slightly. Nothing was dramatically wrong. Everything was just fractionally off. The florist called to say there was a problem with the peonies. Could I choose a substitute? I'd specified peonies 6 months ago and confirmed them twice. The problem had apparently arisen from a supplier issue they'd never encountered before. The venue coordinator emailed to say there had been an inquiry from an unknown number about whether the wedding date was confirmed. Just checking. No issue, they disregarded it, but they wanted me to know. The seating chart I'd finalized got scrambled. The file on the shared drive had been edited, and when I asked David's cousin, who had been helping with logistics, she said she'd received an updated version by email and assumed it was from me. It wasn't from me. Each individual incident had an explanation. Supplier issues happened. Unknown inquiries were probably telemarketers. Emails could be spoofed or misread. But I was a lawyer, and I understood something about patterns that individual explanations couldn't account for. Patterns don't prove intent, but they invite questions. And the question I couldn't stop asking was, who benefits? And then Rachel sent me a message. Wednesday, 9 days before the wedding. My phone on the nightstand, 3 in the morning, the way I always checked it when I couldn't sleep. 3 words. We need to talk. I sat up in bed. I read it 4 times. I didn't respond. I told David the next morning. He read the message. He was quiet for a moment. Don't engage, he said. Whatever she wants, it's not worth opening that door. Don't you want to know why she reached out? Not particularly, he handed the phone back. She's his ex. This is our wedding week. Whatever reason she has for contacting you 9 days before we get married is not a good one. I said, what if it is? He looked at me with the expression I'd learned to recognize. Patient, slightly strained. The expression of a man who has been absorbing this conversation in various forms for months and is running out of ways to appear neutral. Emily, his voice was gentle. I know this has been hard. Mom can be a lot, I know that. And I know the Rachel thing makes you. The Rachel thing. The history, I know it's complicated. But you need to trust me when I tell you that Rachel showing up in our lives right now is not going to improve anything. I put my phone in my bag. I went to work. I did not respond to Rachel's message. I tried to explain to Kara what I was feeling. Kara was my oldest friend, my maid of honor, the person I trusted most in the world outside of David. She listened carefully. She said, Emily, I love you, and I say this as someone who loves you. You have been catastrophizing about Linda for 6 years. Every incident has an explanation. Rachel reaching out is strange, but strange isn't sinister. The seating chart was edited without my knowledge. Stuff like that happens, miscommunications. The venue got an anonymous inquiry about whether the date was confirmed. Could have been literally anyone, a curious family member, a wrong number. I looked at her. You think I'm making this up? I think you're exhausted and stressed, and you've built Linda into something she probably isn't. She squeezed my hand. Marry the man. Stop letting his mother live rent-free in your head. I nodded. I smiled. I let it go. I went home and I cried in the shower for 20 minutes, which I hadn't done in years, because the specific loneliness of being dismissed by the people who love you is different from other kinds of loneliness. It occupies a different place. It makes you doubt the instrument, makes you wonder if the thing you're measuring with is broken rather than the thing you're trying to measure. I lay awake that night thinking, maybe they're right. Maybe I've been fighting a shadow war for so long I've forgotten how to see clearly. The wedding was in 7 days. I want to tell you what my wedding morning felt like. It felt like the particular brightness of a day you've anticipated so long that arriving at it seems slightly unreal. October, clear and cold, the farmhouse catching light in the way old buildings catch it deeply, warmly, as if the light has somewhere to settle. My mother helped me into my dress. Kara did my hair with her hands shaking slightly, which made me love her. My father stood in the doorway of the bridal suite and looked at me with an expression I'm not sure I can adequately describe. Something past pride. Something more like recognition. I was ready. I did not feel afraid. The music started. The doors at the end of the aisle opened. I took my father's arm. I saw David first, standing at the altar, turned toward me. The particular way he held himself when he was trying not to show how much something mattered to him. I saw my friends, my family, the faces of people who had been part of building the life that had led to this room. And then I saw Rachel. Front row, right side, pale blue dress, dark hair. Composed, present, entirely deliberate. And I saw Linda, 3 seats down, and the expression on her face. I kept walking. My legs kept moving because stopping was impossible. Because the music was playing, and my father was beside me, and every person in that room was watching. And the only thing I knew how to do in moments of crisis was keep moving and figure out the rest later. But my mind had split in two. Half of me was walking down the aisle toward the man I loved on the most important morning of my life. The other half was running the numbers. She is here, Linda is smiling, this was not a mistake. I reached the altar. David took my hands. He leaned in close, too close for the room to hear, and said, "Are you okay?" I looked at him. "Rachel is here," I said quietly. His face changed. He turned carefully as if moving too quickly might break something. He scanned the front row. He found her. He went very still. "I don't," he started. "She's sitting next to your mother," I said. The officiant was watching us with the expression of a professional experiencing an unfamiliar situation. I watched something move through David's face, not just surprise, but the specific expression of someone confronting a possibility they'd refused to consider. The expression of recognition arriving late. But before either of us could speak, Rachel stood up. Every head in the room turned. She was holding an envelope. Her voice, when she spoke, was quiet, but in the stillness of that room it carried. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm sorry to do this here. I tried to reach out before." She looked at me directly. "I tried to warn you." Linda, from 3 seats away, said sharply, "Rachel, this is not." "I have emails," Rachel said. She held up the envelope. "I have messages, recordings, 6 years of them." She wasn't speaking to the room. She was speaking to David and to me. "I've been in contact with Linda because she contacted me. She's been contacting me since before you got engaged. She told me David still had feelings for me. She told me the engagement wasn't serious. She told me," her voice steadied, "she told me that if I wanted him back, I should stay available, that I shouldn't move on." The room was completely silent. "I believed her," Rachel said. "For 2 years I believed her, and when I finally understood what she was actually doing, that she'd been saying something different to both of us, I tried to stop being part of it." She paused. "But she kept contacting me, right up until last week. She told me the wedding wouldn't happen. She told me that if I came and showed up, it would confirm what she'd been telling David all along, that I wasn't over him, that there was unfinished business." Linda was on her feet now. "Rachel, this is—" "I have the messages, Linda." The room did not move. Linda sat back down. Rachel held the envelope toward the aisle, toward neither David nor me specifically. Just held it out. "I'm not here to ruin anything," she said. Her voice was slightly unsteady now, not dramatic, just human. "I'm here because she told me to come, and I decided that if I was going to come, I was going to tell the truth instead." David took the envelope. He opened it there, at the altar, which was not where any of this was supposed to happen. But we had already departed significantly from the day I'd planned. I watched him read. I watched his face. He was quiet for a long time, long enough that the officiant shifted slightly, long enough that someone in the back row cleared their throat. Then David looked at his mother. Linda was composed. She had her hands folded in her lap, her expression arranged, the professional serenity of a woman who had managed difficult rooms before. She looked back at him steadily. "Did you contact Rachel?" David asked. His voice was even. "I care about Rachel," Linda said. "She was part of our family for—" "Did you tell her the engagement wasn't serious?" A pause, 1 second, 2. "I expressed some concerns, yes." "Did you tell her to come today?" "I thought it might help you see." "Help me see what?" The composure fractured slightly, not collapsed, just shifted, the first visible movement in the surface. "What you actually want," she said quietly. "What you had before she—" A brief gesture in my direction that I will remember for the rest of my life. Not a pointed finger, just a gesture, as if I were a condition to be named. David looked at his mother for a long moment. Then he turned away from her. He faced me. "I need to tell you something," he said. His voice was low enough that only I could hear it. "About 2 years into our relationship, my mother told me she didn't think you were right for me. She said it was something she felt in her gut." He paused. "I told her she was wrong, but I let it go at that. I didn't push back the way I should have. I thought if I just held the middle ground, it would resolve itself." "It didn't," I said. "No," he looked at the envelope in his hands. "Rachel wasn't the problem. I knew that. I think I've always known that. I let you believe Rachel was the problem because it was easier than naming what the actual problem was." "Your mother's—" "My mother?" he said it plainly, without hedging. My mother, who has spent 38 years building a life where she is the most important relationship I have, and who understood that marrying you would mean she wasn't. I looked at him. I need to know if you can change that, I said. Not promise it, actually change it. I don't know if I can do it perfectly, he said, but I know I'm done pretending she's something she isn't. He paused. And I know that what I want, what I have wanted for 4 years, what I was standing at this altar for is you. Not the negotiation, not the performance, you. I stood at the altar of my own wedding with 200 people watching and thought about 6 years of erosion, 6 years of comparisons and dismissals, and the low-grade constant work of defending my right to occupy space in a relationship I'd chosen freely. I thought about the woman I'd been when I started, diplomatic, patient, willing to absorb, and I thought about the woman I was now, standing at the end of a very long aisle with her dress exactly right, and her flowers exactly right, and a man who had finally, at the worst possible moment, managed to say the true thing. I thought, I am done seeking her approval, not as a decision I made in that moment, as a recognition of something I'd already become. Okay, I said. David looked at me. Okay, we're getting married, or, okay, we're getting married, I said. But we're going to have a very long conversation later. Something in his face loosened. I know. I turned to the officiant. I'm sorry, I said. You can continue. The ceremony continued. We said the words, we meant them. I did not cry during the vows, which surprised me, though I came close during the ring exchange in a way I hadn't anticipated. Not from romance, exactly, but from the specific relief of arriving somewhere you'd been afraid might not exist. Linda sat in the front row for the duration. I was aware of her peripherally, the composed posture, the folded hands. No one moved to sit beside her. Her brother, who had been next to her before Rachel stood, had quietly relocated. David's cousins were elsewhere. The seat to her left remained empty. She had spent 6 years ensuring that no woman would be sufficient. No woman would be chosen over her. No woman would inherit the version of her son she'd spent 3 decades building. And she sat in the front row of his wedding, surrounded by empty seats, and watched him marry someone anyway. After the ceremony, during the photos, Rachel found me. She was still holding the empty envelope. She looked like someone who had braced for something much worse than what had actually happened, and wasn't sure yet how to carry the leftover tension. I should have reached out sooner, she said. You reached out, I said. That's what matters. She looked at me carefully. She told me for 2 years that you were the reason he'd pulled away from her, that you'd isolated him, that he was unhappy. She told me for 2 years that you were the standard I could never reach. Rachel closed her eyes briefly, opened them. She did a number on both of us. She did, I said. We stood there for a moment, 2 women who had been set against each other by the same person, who had finally had the conversation too late, and in the worst possible setting, who were now standing on the other side of it, trying to work out what to do with the understanding. I hope it's good, Rachel said finally. Your marriage, I genuinely hope it's good. Thank you for coming, I said. She nodded, she walked away. I watched her go and I thought, Linda had tried to use her as a weapon and Rachel had refused to be one. In the end, at the last moment, but still. The reception was quieter than I'd imagined it would be. Not badly quiet, just human, the way events are human when something real has happened inside them. People danced, people toasted. My father gave a speech that made my mother cry, which he'd predicted, which was why he'd practiced it 11 times. David and I danced to the song we'd chosen a year ago. He held me the way he held me when he meant it, without performance, and I let myself be in it rather than beside it. Linda left after dinner. She said goodbye to David briefly, formally. He was polite. He was not warm. It was, I thought, the beginning of a very long renegotiation, one that would not be linear, would not be clean, that would require more conversations than either of us wanted to have. But it was a beginning, and I had spent 6 years learning the difference between a beginning and a promise, and I understood what this one cost him, and I held on to that. A month later, David and I sat down with a therapist, his suggestion, which I had not expected and did not take for granted. We talked about his mother. We talked about the pattern that had taken 6 years to name. We talked about the specific damage of loving someone who has been trained their whole life to make themselves indispensable by making everyone else insufficient. It was not easy, but I had stopped needing it to be easy. I had stopped needing to be accepted by a woman who could not afford to accept me. What I had learned, slowly, expensively, in the years between a first dinner and a front row dress, and the long road back from the altar, was this. You cannot earn your way into a place that someone has decided you don't belong. You can only decide, eventually, that belonging to yourself is enough to start with, and build from there.